Hello, everyone. This is QlikMeetup Vienna 7 with Luke. Luke is an independent software developer, and he's hosting amazing courses when it comes to Mashups and React APIs. And we will dive deep into these topics today. So stay tuned for that. Before we get into the discussion, please let me make some brief housekeeping. So yeah, we are trying to make a platform for individual developers. We are not hosting anything commercial. Yeah, what we are presenting and doing, we will put on YouTube later on. So yeah, please keep that in mind. And we would highly appreciate an open discussion. So in case you have any questions, you have the ability to unmute yourself and ask directly. You can put your comments in the chat as well, and we will try to cover them. And yeah, this is it from my side. So without further ado, hello, Luke. Welcome to the show. And yeah, could you please tell us how you got into the topic and how you gained your expertise in that area? Oh, Luke, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
There we go. Back on mute. Cool. Yeah. So I've been working with QlikSense and the Qlik products for many years. We were quite an early adopter of QlikSense, and really through necessity of when it was released, I kind of got into building extensions and getting involved on the API side of Qlik. So I'm a self-taught web developer, and myself and a couple of friends wanted to kind of create something. So we created a online Udemy course of how to build extensions in D3, and enjoyed that process. And I went on to author the QlikSense Mashup Bootcamp, which is more of an looking at mashups, so from the simple embeds from iframes through to the capability APIs, and then through also to using the engine API for more advanced stuff. And I've also co-authored a React package for building mashups called Motor.js. So this is on GitHub, open source and free. So I'll cover a little bit about that also in this session and show you guys. So quite a good thing also to learn from if you're looking to get started with mashups and particularly React.
Great. And how long did it take you to acquire those expertise? I mean, do you have related tasks in your day job, or you started from scratch?
Started from scratch, I'd say around 6 years ago now. In front end web development. So my day job, I do lead a team of developers. So we do have a couple of full stack developers plus Qlik developers. So I've always been in the area, but was just super interested to get hands on in development. So yeah, did that on the side.
Awesome. And now, at least from my perspective, you are the leading, or you have the leading course with regards to mashups, which nobody else seems to cover, at least not to my knowledge. So congrats to that.
Yeah, thanks for sure. Definitely the longest one and most in depth. I think there's maybe a few other smaller ones, but yeah, for sure on Udemy, certainly the largest and probably one of the leading. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've applied myself, so I have hands-on experience, and I really like it. I wish I had more tasks in my daily business related to it, but I hope that will come soon. So yeah, why don't you show us something about your motor?
Yeah, so let me share. So I'm not sure of the well, how experienced the developers are on the call, but this is kind of how I've pitched it. Do jump in and speak if maybe it's a little bit too basic, you want to see some more advanced stuff, or even the opposite, if you want to start from scratch, and I can show you some proper React basics. So do jump in. But this is what I thought we would cover in today's session. So learning some basics of React. So that includes some using props, React hooks, and also the context API. And then looking at learning how to build ClikSense mashups in more of a React way. So we will be going through some code, but I think a lot about this session, what I was thinking of is getting you thinking about how you would architect building a mashup in React, because it's certainly different to how you may think about it using the Dev Hub and the capability APIs and also some other frameworks. So it's kind of using those features of React and applying those features to ClikSense mashups. And then learning how to connect to ClikSense SaaS in React. So the example we're going to run through is connecting to SaaS and then learning how to deploy a React app into production. So that's the aims of the session. And as I said earlier, do jump in if it's too simple or not simple enough. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and cover these off. Now, before I did, I wanted to talk about maybe the future of ClikSense mashups and just facilitate maybe a small discussion on this. Now, this is just my thoughts. I'm not affiliated with Qlik in any way, but just gave some thinking as to where I think mashups are going in ClikSense. So the first one, which Bernard and I were speaking about just before we got started, is the capability APIs on the way out and Nebula.js on the way in, or already arrived. So the capability APIs, I mean, I don't have any official information about whether they're being depreciated, but certainly Qlik seems to be focusing on using Nebula both for building extensions and also for embedding ClikSense objects into mashups. So the capability APIs do have some dependencies on require.js and also load a lot of unnecessary CSS and other files into your project. So it's not an ideal way of really how to build and architect a mashup, and I think Nebula.js solves a lot of those problems. That's my son you can hear in the background. So they do not integrate very well with modern JavaScript frameworks like React and Vue as some examples, and React, what we're looking in today. Second is a move towards low code or no code. So there's a big industry trend at the moment to move in the direction of low code platforms. And so I'm kind of expecting a little bit of movement in this area in relation to mashups in Qlik. So this could potentially be Qlik integrations with other low-code platforms such as Power Apps or OutSystems, maybe third-party vendors building more low-code platforms for building mashups as well. And I think that with the removal of the Dev Hub in SaaS, there is a little bit of a gap here that I expect Qlik or someone else to address. And the last one is tighter integration with hosting platforms and kind of CI and CD pipelines. So you're not able to host mashups on SaaS like you can do in enterprise. So potentially there may also be a move in this area. So maybe Qlik will add some of that on their own, or maybe they will have tighter integrations with other external hosting options. It's already made pretty easy to deploy. You've got platform as a service companies like Heroku and DigitalOcean and Netlify. So it's very easy now to deploy applications into prod, but potentially Qlik may maybe be doing something in this area. So that was just my thoughts on where we may be going in the future of Mashups, and I'll just pause at that point and just see if there's any questions before we move on. Okay, cool. So next, moving on to architecting a React mashup, and then just a few points here, and then I'm going to jump into some code. So when we think about building a mashup in React, there's a few features of React that I personally quite like to use, and that's what I'm going to talk about, and hopefully you guys will learn something from it. And the first one is building out custom React hooks to manage any reusable logic for interacting with the Qlik engine. Now, this logic could be creating session objects for hypercubes. It could be getting information about an application, and it could also be running actions against the engine. So that could be running selections or reloading a particular application. So building these reusable hooks is a way to have that logic in a nice, easy, and reusable fashion. And obviously, one of the advantages of React is that we can break those, break down smaller components and functions, and it's all about reuse and making it easier once you've got one project to go and build out your second project. And when we have a little look at the source code of Motor.js, that's something that really will jump out. Is how we've got a lot of reusable logic in React hooks. Next is the context API. So in all of your hooks or components, or the majority of them, especially the ones that are actually using the engine, you will need to have that engine object. And rather than passing that as a prop through all your components, the React Context API is a great tool here to just provide that at any level of your component hierarchy. And we will look at an example of that when we get into some coding. Global state management is obviously necessary on large React implementations, React projects more generally. In QlikSense mashups, I don't really find that I need to use it very often. So Qlik is handling loads of that state for you. So the state around your selection state, that in particular, but it's kind of a layer on that engine. So the Qlik engine is doing an awful lot for you. You don't really need to be managing much outside of that. Maybe if you're pointing to two different applications, you want to keep some stuff in sync, or maybe some global objects. But I don't use it too much. Sometimes for the layout, it would be used. Maybe if you've got a sidebar, some other layout, you could use the context API, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily required. And then the last point is we're going to have our UI elements in separate reusable components, which is obviously in a very React way to do things. Okay, so again, jump in if there's any questions on this, and while I get ready with starting an example.
I'm thinking still about the previous slide. You cannot run mashups on SaaS?
No, you can. You cannot host mashups on SaaS. When I say hosting, it's where the mashup is sitting. So in the Dev Hub, you can, go to the Qlik URL and be on your mashup site. But the Qlik SaaS doesn't have any hosting, so you need external hosting.
No, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe in that space, Qlik may have some tighter integration coming with maybe some third parties, Heroku or similar. But we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to create a React application. So let's create a React app called group demo. So this first example, what I'm going to do is connect to a QlikSAS instance, set up a structure almost like an empty shell of a React app, and just a few of the concepts I talked about we'll just use in really quite just a demo example of how you'd use them in a mashup. So we'll use the context API, we'll use a hook, and we'll connect to the engine. Okay, so I'm going to launch Visual Studio. And go to repos. I'm also going to push it into Git, which will come in handy later. I will make all of this public, obviously, as well, and I'm sure we can share the link after.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a simple React application. For those of you quite new to React, we've got our root of our project at index.js. The React DOM render method is how we're going to render our JSX. And this is what we're rendering. We're rendering this React strict mode component, and more importantly, our app component. And we're assigning that to our root div. And the HTML is here in our public folder. And here's our HTML div with the ID of root. So we're applying all of our JavaScript to this ID. Now, in the QlikSense Mashup Bootcamp, I do talk about the separation of concerns and keeping your HTML separate to your JavaScript, separate to your CSS, which is quite an outdated way to do things now. Now it's everything is so reactive that you want to be keeping your HTML in your JavaScript and even your CSS, which is why the popularity of JSX has and React has gone through the roof. So in app.js, I'm going to clear out everything here. And we can write some text, and I'll just delete some files which we don't need. Okay. And let's start a project, which will be running on localhost 3000, which is just coming up. Oh, I deleted app.js. It was a mistake. So let's rebuild it. Okay. Cool. And here's our React application running on our local host. Nice. So I spoke about a couple of things at the start. One was hooks. So we're going to be creating some hooks. One was components. And the third was context. And let's create a first hook. So there's a couple of ways we can connect to our QlikSense engine, and I'm going to do this connection by using a reusable hook, which I'm going to call use engine. So in use engine, we're going to want to create a React function. And custom hook is it's essentially just a function for reusable logic that contains state. So in React, in order to make a component have some intelligence, we need to access a state object, and that's when you can store property values that belong to a component. Now, I'm going to create a state object called engine. To null. Now we do need to import useState, and we're destructuring it here, which is why we can access useState here rather than react.useState, and import that from React. So engine is our state object, and setEngine can be called as a function to change the state object. Now, in order to connect to an engine, we need Enigma. So I'm going to install Enigma.js. I'm just going to also have another example on another screen, so I'm just going to copy over a little bit of code just to import Enigma and a schema, which you also need when using Enigma. So useState is initialized when the component renders. There is another hook that comes with React that is run after rendering, and we can use that to make some updates to our component, and that is useEffect. So the useEffect hook is where I'm going to connect to our engine. So component renders, we're setting engine to null, and then we're running a function, and this is going to be connecting to our engine. Now, Enigma is a promise-based library, which is asynchronous. So we need an async function that we're just going to call in this useEffect. And I'm just going to self-execute it. So it's just going to execute when this useEffect is run. I'm going to create some variables. So tenant URI, web integration ID, and app ID. So this is my SaaS tenant, motor.eu.QlikCloud.com. Let me log in. So this is the tenant that we're going to want to access. I'm going to access this app, Luke Wearables. So I'm going to copy this. And here, no, that's the web integration ID, the app ID. So in order to connect to our engine, we also need a web integration ID. So what we can do is we can go to our management console in QlikSense SaaS, and we're going to create one. Now I'm going to use one that I've already created. So if you get onto web and just use this test mashup ID. So here what you'll be doing is essentially whitelisting origins for your application. And you can see the first one there is localhost 3000, which is what our app is running on. Okay, next, what we want to do is we need to fetch a token from a QlikSense site, and then we need to create a session accessing the secure WebSocket with our web integration ID and our token. So I'm going to create a function to do this, which is going to be asynchronous, and we're going to fetch that token. And we can fetch that from our tenant tenant URI, which we created. It's API endpoint. V1 CSRF token. Okay, so we're going to grab the token. We need to pass in some headers. So mode is going to be cause, credentials, include, and we're going to include headers, which is our web integration ID. And that's our web integration ID. And then content type, which is JSON. Cool, and we can do some error handling if there's an error. And I'm just going to log something to the console. Right, so we're going to fetch our token and then install that. So fetch results. It is get, and let's get that token, which is CSRF token. And then we can create our session, const session, and we can use enigma.create. And we want to create and access the WebSockets. So we've got our URL, and then in a minute, and then we want to create our socket. That URL, new WebSocket connection. Okay, I'm going to copy in the URL, save it a time. As I said before, this is going to be a secure connection to our site, and this needs to change actually. We're already including the HTTPS here, so we just need motor.eu.QlikCloud.com. And then we're going to access our app and then our app ID, which we've got here. And we're passing our Qlik web integration ID. And we're passing our token. Okay, once you've got that, I'm just going to store that. So a variable called global. Let's open the session. And then let's create a variable called doc. And we're going to open the app with our app ID. And then we need to answer that document. Okay, so we've created state, which is empty initially, then our use effect will run, and we're executing an asynchronous function. We're fetching our token, and we're creating a session, and in that session URL, we're passing our web integration ID, and we're passing that token, and then we are setting our engine to this, to the engine object. And then we can import it here and use it. So let's import use engine from hooks/use engine. And one more thing I think I've forgotten to do. So we actually need to return our engine. Return Okay. WebSocket is not defined. Here we go, capital S. Okay, and let's just console log the engine object. Cool, so let's keep an eye on our console here. So cool, so as I said, the component initially renders as null, and then it re-renders because that use effect runs after rendering, and then we grab our engine object. And this is basically the key now to running any actions against the engine. Now, we don't just want to be passing this around through every component, which is where context comes in. So let's use the context API. So this is accessible at any level of our component tree. So let's create a new context called engine context.js. Let's import React from React. And I'm going to just export an empty context. So it's going to be a constant variable called engine context. And we're going to create an empty context. I don't want to import React from there, obviously. Nice. Now in app.js, what we want to do is provide this object as context to all of our child components. So let's import the context. I'm going to create a component here, which I'm going to call some components.js. And export that. Cool. Okay. So let's import that component as well. Okay, we won't use it right now. Okay, so we've got our engine object, and we can provide that using the provider method. So engine context.provider, and then we're providing a value in this context, which is going to be engine. And then we need also to wrap this around our project. So now any components within this, in the hierarchy tree, will be able to access this, this context value. You could put it in index.js, which is probably where you'd more commonly see it, but we put it here in app.js. And say, for example, in some components, we want to grab that. We can import use context from React. Again, it's liking to change that to core.js and import engine context. And we can set a variable called engine to use our engine context, and then console log the engine. I think I've got another console log somewhere, or maybe I removed it. Okay, so I didn't, just so we know. Coming from. Okay, and there we have the engine object in this component. Now this is a trivial example because we could just pass it here. You know, we could say engine equals engine and pass it as props to some component, and then we can either destructure it here, or we can access props.engine to access that. So in this example, you're not going to have a problem where you're going to have to keep passing props down and down the tree, but it's just demonstrating when your application gets bigger in size and you're going to have loads of components and hooks and other stuff going on. It's just a much cleaner way of doing things. So any questions on that at the moment? Otherwise, I'm going to create one hook just to show you how you maybe would do something quite simple with the engine.
One attendant just pointed out that there was a Qlik expert talk, I guess they called it, where Jeff Goldberg was talking about hosting code or mashups on SAS. I haven't attended it myself, but I will follow that up later on.
Oh, cool. So he's confirmed that they're planning to do that, or they're kind of thinking about it?
Seems like they're outlining some kind of way, but I have to check it out myself.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see for sure. I think that's something that is lost with the move to SAS, like how easy it is in the Dev Hub to actually host mashups.
But did anybody attend? Would you like to share what? Yeah, he said. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe
as you pointed out. Yeah.
So maybe integrate with a third party too. I know, like for example, Heroku have got a CLI tool where you can kind of push code to be hosted there quite easily. So maybe Qlik are looking to integrate with something like that. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens in that space.
Yeah, but great demo so far.
Cool, nice. Yeah, so I hope you guys are all learning something. Okay, so why don't I create a hook? So quite a simple thing we could do is just get some properties of the application. So I'm going to create a new hook called use app. Okay. So similar setup to before. So we're going to need use context. We're going to need state. We're going to need use effect. We're going to need the engine object. So const engine use context. Engine context. Nice, that's imported that for me. And we're going to use this in some components. So let's import use app. We'll be using that here. So const test equals use app for now. So when we use the hook, we'll be executing it and then grabbing something back and then rendering it in this component. Okay, I'm going to set state. So const. I'm going to call QApp and then set app. Let's do that, and I'm going to use the same kind of thing. So use effect is then going to run. And again, we're going to need an asynchronous function. Because Enigma's promise-based, that's the reason we need to execute this async function within our use effect. Okay, and let's just log the engine just to make sure we're getting that. Are we not getting it? So, is this rendering? Let's have a look. Render. Oh, I thought I saw the objects, the engine there. First rendering is our use effect running. Is now our okay. Is that running? Yeah. Okay. So, opening our engine object. We are. Okay, nice. Not sure what went wrong there. Okay, so engine is going to initially render null. So we need to handle that. So if there's no engine, do nothing else and stuff. So in stuff, what we want to do is grab the engine object, and then I can just console log. And we have our engine object here. So what I'm going to do is use the get app properties method. If you go to JSON API reference, this is what I use really when trying to develop off the engine and look up some new stuff. Super useful when you're not sure how to do something and you need to know the inner workings of the engine. So in dot class here, loads of sorts of things we can do, and there's this get app properties method, and this is what we're going to be using. So it's got all the details here. So get app properties returns an object of nx app properties. So this is all the data that we're going to get from calling this method. So we'll get the app title, we'll get the last reload time, and some other information. So let's have a go. Very, very simple. So we can store that into a variable called app properties, and we just need to await synchronous.q. Get app properties. Now remember, when you're using this in Enigma, it is camel casing. In the docs, I think it was a capital G. Okay, and then we can just set our app to properties, nice and simple, and we can return. Now, use effect comes with an additional parameter here, which controls when use effect is retriggered. So we only want to retrigger use effect when the engine object changes, so we can put that in as a dependency here. I think I've misspelled something. Nope, I just need to include this in the else statement. Okay, and I've returned QApp here as an object, so we can actually destructure that. Use that. Also log it, and we can see if that has worked, and it has. So here we've got that object. Now there's a lot more properties here than they've documented, so they just probably haven't documented everything. But the important ones you can see: ID, modified date, created date, Q title, and we can render that to the screen. So const title equals QApp dot Q title, and then we can add title in here. Then we got the name of the application in our mashup. So again, super simple, but hopefully it demonstrates something. It demonstrates, one, we're using a hook to do a reusable run a reusable bit of code, applying something against the engine. We're using context here, so we could actually use use this hook at any level of our component tree. We don't need to worry about passing props or anything like that. And yeah, so we've applied something on the engine, and we've now returned that, rendered it to the UI.
Awesome.
So what I want to show you is the source code to Motor.js, which I can come on to next. So if we go into SRC, go into our library, go into hooks. So exactly the same model that I've demonstrated end-to-end in a very simple way is how this library's been built using a number of reusable hooks. And these are all also exported from the library, so you can just export our use hypercube hook and then use that to simplify the data. If you want to build your own charts, we've also added charts and components as well. So obviously, if you want to build a hypercube, it's a lot more involved than what I've just demonstrated. The list object, so for filter, is a little bit simpler, but I can just talk through same sort of thing. So we've got a use effect that's running. We are creating a session object based off a hypercube definition or a list object definition, which we create in this generate cube prop here. And then we're creating a session object, running an update function, which is here, and then we're getting the layout and then grabbing the data. So create your hypercube definition or your list object definition, and then create a session object, and then get the layouts and get the data. But with reusable bits of code from this, you can copy into your projects, and it kind of makes that a little bit easier to use. Okay, any questions on that?
So for me, as a newbie to the subject, it looks amazing. It allows you to store and recreate procedures you made for other projects, and I imagine it would speed up your process, your project tremendously. So I would expect to a libraries of sort of we can share and like a JavaScript library or stuff to make the development faster?
Yeah, exactly. Like you've always got that initial setup. So by kind of using this library or taking out some of the hooks, or there's code that you can use certainly to speed up your development. When you use the engine API, there's like a lot of code initially to get stuff out, which is why reusable code like this is extremely helpful when getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we said, I mean, if there is a move away from, say, the capability APIs to something else like Nebula, but maybe there'll be more of a use case for where you'd want to get the data from the engine rather than just rendering the kind of UI components from your app.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that was all I had planned for this example. So I've got another app I was going to show. So I'm just going to show you how to use Motor.js, and maybe some of you will find that helpful. So I've got a repo. I'm just trying to find. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I've got a Material UI, very simple application, and I'm going to add Motor.js to it, add in some components, and then we can I can show you how to use a library. Okay. So very simple React application based off Material. So what I'm going to do is just load in a current selections bar from Motor.js, load in some filters, and show you what that looks like. So as I've said, we've got in this library, we've got lots of components. We've got hooks. So they're all exported individually. So you can just use the hooks if you like, or the components, but they're all in here. The docs. So we've got a couple of different libraries. Some are commercial, Engine, Nebula, and this our open source one, Motor.js Core. So all of the components and everything are all documented here. Okay, so let's have a look. So we got our index.js. We are loading our app components. Then we got our header section and just a simple grid layout, and that's all really. I think the header section, we've got that title, filter section is empty, and I've added the library already. So I've installed Motor.js Core, and then we can start using it. Okay, I'm just going to pull down example. Okay, So in order to provide context to our components, we need our top level motor components. So I'm going to import that from Motor.js core, and then we're going to wrap our application with this. And this is doing exactly what I showed you all on the simple example earlier. Where we use that engine context, this is just basically a souped up example of that. It also comes with a login component if you're using SaaS, and the not connected component. So if you lose connection to the engine, you get that pop-up to tell you to reconnect. I'm just going to copy in a config. So we need the host, whether it's secure, port, prefix, app ID, web integration ID. So exactly what we were doing on that previous example in our hook is essentially what you're passing into that component. And if we look at the code in our components motor, this is using our use engine hook, which is here. So a little bit more code, but you'll recognize this from what we just typed out. Very simple, how we connect. We're creating that WebSocket connection, and we're just passing into this component some of those variables. Okay. Cool. Okay, so that's providing context to our hooks, our components. So in app.js then, underneath our header section, why don't we import a component from the library? Let's import current selections, also a filter. So here I'm going to use our current selections components, and underneath, let's use a filter. In our filter, we need to pass in a dimension prop, and this is going to be a dimension from our application. I'm just going to check to see what that is. So we can use company, which is invalid. Let's have a look. So we're using this Luke Wearables app again. Company, I think it's company name. We need company name. So let's try that. Okay, nice, undefined, so it doesn't have a label at the moment. So I can also add a label prop. Company. Nice, and then we've got our company here, and we can make selections, and our current selections bar is recording those selections. So the library is also all themable. So in our motor component, there is also a theme prop, uses CSS in JavaScript. And you can edit and merge with the base theme. So the theme is all documented in our documentation. Let's say we want to change our color, so we can go into global color. And then we've got our brand color, and the brand light color that are used quite regularly across our components. So we can change that to white, and I'm just going to use hex value here. And light is not defined. Let's reload. Syntax looks good, and you can see the colors now changed. So we can easily change the look and feel, and even the styling of this via that theme object. It's all listed in there, so you can change pretty much anything. We can add some more filters. So we've got category, city. So let's add category. With our second filter, we can also move this into a new section if we want. So actually, I won't do this. I think that's enough for demonstration purposes. We could wrap this in another component, but don't feel the need to do that. But there we go. There's our filters, and then we can also add a chart. So we do have some charts also based off VisX. So we are using VisX for the charting. So it's an Airbnb visualization library. So what we've done is we just put a layer on this which interacts with the engine. So using the hooks, we can render these charts in a motor mashup. And I can show you what that looks like now. So I'm going to simplify this a bit. So we got our header, current selections, filter. So let me remove this, and we can have a chart in here. So let's make it the full width of our screen, and we can add in a bar chart. Okay, and then we can just use a bar. I'm going to add also some props, a height, and then we need to be adding an object of columns from our application. So I'm going to add a key field, company name, which we've used before. And this is an array of objects. So key field and key label of company. And we can also add a measure. That measure, I'm just going to sum quantity and a label there of quantity. Need to close this. Cool. And here is our chart rendered to the screen. We can obviously make some selections and reduce that down. So I've obviously done that just by reference, but if we go into visualizations and bar, we've got the full properties here. So we can customize a lot in terms of sort order, size, labeling, and then if we also go down to the theme API, we've got the full theme here as well. So we just exposed everything, that all the CSS object. So all this can be edited and customized, so that base theme can also change.
Do you have pivot tables as well?
No pivot table. No, that's quite a big one to tackle. We do have a table a paginating table. You can see an example here. So it's got selections, coloring based on certain numbers. Yeah, but no pivot table at the moment.
I think that would be nice to have because everybody is complaining about them. So
yeah, pivot table, obviously you don't have that support in Nebula, so you're kind of stuck using the capability APIs at the moment if you want a pivot table in your mashup. Quite a big lift.
Where do you get your knowledge in terms of Nebula, what it can do, and what comes out next? Is there just the Slack channel, or where do you get your information from?
Yeah, I don't have any other information, just based on what's in the Slack channel. I think the team haven't revealed, I don't think, what they're working on. So I don't know what they're working on, but I imagine a pivot table is probably on their list, but it's quite a big job. So I don't know if they'll be tackling that next or anything. The Slack channel is probably where I get most of the information from in terms of what's being looked at, and if you follow some of the conversations on there, there's always stuff coming up around what they're kind of looking at, the things they're looking at.
No?
Okay. Cool. So I just have one last thing to show, and that'll be how we deploy a mashup like this into production. So we've got a few warnings, and I'm just going to clean up first, because this could maybe cause some issues. I'm going to deploy. App.js use styles. So this is not being used at all. Header section. This I can just remove. We don't need these in header section. And make styles we don't need. Okay, so let's push this up into Git. So demo finished. Let's commit it. So as I was saying earlier, I mean, there's the deployments are made super easy now by all these platform as a services and different companies. So I quite like Netlify, so I'm gonna use this just to demonstrate how easy it is. So you need to sign up. So I've got this is a completely free account, and we can connect to GitHub. So demo engine is what I believe I've just demoed, but I can just double check that. No, it wasn't. Demo engine was our first demo. I think this one was called what's a quick way of me motor demo? Yeah, motor demo. Okay. Motor demo. So we want to deploy master. Yarn build should do the job. So let's deploy. Site deploy is in progress. So one thing, when we do deploy, we need to make sure that our URL is whitelisted. So if we have a look now at our index.js, we're using this web integration ID. So we can recognize, localhost 3000 is recognized by Qlik because I've added it as a trusted origin. So we just need to do the same with the deployed site. Why don't we go and do that? So back to the console, web. Test mashup. Yeah, if there's any questions, go ahead.
Ancora che lo fai adesso era per mandarti.
We have a question from Ryan. He asks if you can make selections from an end, with beginning and ending of selection in your table.
Yeah, we got that feature. So maybe I can show you actually. Why don't we add another grid, our table. Let's add a few more. So city. And there is an issue with the table. Let's have a look at the docs. Holland is the API. Okay, so I think it's a little bit more complex than our charts. So drag this on. We've actually got an object containing dimensions and measures. So maybe I can copy this in and then strip some stuff out. So let's do sum of quantity. We can add company name. And we can have city. Cool. So here's our simple table. So yeah, we've got multiple selections, beginning and ending selection, and then like our click style kind of selections bar as well. So this is what it looks like in action. Nice.
Nice.
Cool. So I think that has been pushed into prod. So let's have a look. Here we go. Now nothing is rendering, but I imagine that's because we haven't added the whitelist. So we need to whitelist this in our origin. And this is our localhost one. So let's refresh this. And there we go. There's our app accessible in production. Now, I mentioned we also comes with a login component. So if I was to log out and then refresh this, we're going to be prompted to log in. So our kind of use engine, it's actually not so much code. I can show you. So we have we trap an error if we were unable to log in, and then we launch our login component. And if you kind of look into this yourself, this is the code that you need. Really, it's very, very simple. So this will redirect to your site for you to log in, and then once you've logged in, it's just going to redirect you back with the ticket, and then we're able to access. So nice. Yeah, these charts also have range selection as well, so there's quite a few nice features on there. Cool.
And lasso you don't have, do you?
No, we don't have lasso. This is kind of our range selection. Yeah, it'd be quite tricky. I don't know any libraries with that. Maybe like on the scatter, you could have like an X and a Y range. We didn't have a scatter chart yet, but that could be like a more feasible way. But I don't know how difficult a lasso object is.
And have you anybody seen who was able to make right button click? Because I've never seen it in a web development context.
Seen what? Sorry.
The right button click, when you to export something, for example.
Yeah, I think there are libraries for that. I don't. We might actually have it on the table. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Cool. So that was all from me in terms of the demo. So are there any more questions, or also open to suggestions of other stuff that people are keen to see? We can have a future React mashup session, maybe doing something a bit different.
Yeah, it would be awesome. So just let's say and apologize from my side, because this was on the higher technical end of our scope, let's say. So I apologize if we don't have the appropriate community who is all full stack web developers. But at least for me, it was very interesting, and I hope for the other ones as well. Yeah. So if there are no questions, we can conclude. Yeah. And yeah, thank you for your time. Please send me the GitHub link, and I will post it. Yeah, I hope we can make a follow-up sessions in case there are new developments you would like to show us.
Yeah. I can even do a more like intro to React. Happy to do that. If some of the guys in here are just getting started, I'm kind of wanting to explore React in a bit more detail, and I'll share my my details as well. So if there are any follow-up questions, you can just reach out.
Yeah. So for me, I feel obliged to finish my course, because I think I'm half through. So the most important part is missing. And yeah, thanks again. We will of course host this link. I'll show you. I will post links to you as well. And yeah, it was great having you. Thank you for your time. And yeah, just a shout out to our community. The next meetup session we won't do in summers, because I want to make a summer break. So we will schedule it for September, and I have scheduled it with Oleg Trojansky. Maybe some of you know him from Rob's masterclass. He's doing performance tuning, and he has some nice project he wants to show us. He's working with Hara. So stay tuned for that. And yeah. So thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks.
So